Hello, so I'm here today and just taking this opportunity to have a short interview with our keynote speaker, Felicia Flubber. So I want to thank you for taking this opportunity to sit down with us. Oh, please, it's my pleasure. It's a big honor to be here. And tomorrow at the conference and everything, it'll be great. I look forward to your presentation. So you've traveled and done a lot of speaking about the deaf community and the culture, wealth, the CDW. So now, people are getting more interested and more into the conversation. So I think people today look at interpreters and they look at the culture wealth and they realize that the time is right. And it's really interesting to look back through the years and look at how technology has changed. And really, this article is just ahead of its time. And now today, more and more colleges and universities, they're having deaf studies programs, and they're just continuing to expand, and people are really getting interested in deaf culture and the language. And so that's really improved and grown. So, and this is where more of that culture wealth analysis is really coming in, and that's what I'm fascinated with. So interpreters obviously have a need to understand the culture wealth, and it's important for them to understand. I feel that it's very important to understand that the deaf community's culture wealth. Oh, it's so important. I think a lot of people in this discussion, in this profession, they started today, and we've been celebrating 50 years, but I really want them to step back and analyze themselves and realize where they started in the community. Were they volunteering? How did that whole thing start? So looking at that beginning and then looking at the deaf community, we can see why that's important, because we can analyze the oppression that the community faced. And with any oppressed community, you have that support and that connection. And the interpreter profession can help raise that. And it would never increase without it. And so I think that's why it's very important now that the deaf culture wealth, people look at us with pity, or, oh, we need to help them, we need to support them. That's not what it is. If you look at the community and think, oh, this is how we help them succeed through everyday life, that's fine. That's a good perspective. And if you look at the linguistics, and of course linguistics, or, there's so many things. But really, if you look at it, as how we can support and how we can help that and lift it, then we can help lift each other. And that's one of the most important things to remember about the deaf culture wealth. So there's so many different topics that we can go through. like how to use an interpreter, or maybe mistakes that are used. What does the deaf community need to know? What do they need to feel? I think the most important thing to understand is that we're human. We make mistakes. But also, like, what we learned about oppressive communities, like the deaf culture, like, how do we connect to that? How do we help raise them up? If that learning's not happening, if that's not in their lives and part of their experience, they don't really know what to do. But they learn that later through an interpreter training program or through other people, or it doesn't matter, but they have to go through that learning process. And that's where they tend to make mistakes. And people make mistakes too. Interpreters, other people, even deaf people, like, we all make mistakes. How to communicate with people and how to relate with them. But we must own our mistakes. And that's not always easy to do when you're working with an oppressive community. Like, how do we have success? How do we show our frustrations and things? And we still need that. But really, that's just part of the process. Showing that we're open to working with the community, showing our support for the deaf culture, and helping lift them up, and being that supportive ally, like, that's the most important connection. And then until then, we will continue to have that struggle. So what happens when you stand up there and present to all of those people, what you've learned? Like, what do you expect or hope to happen? I imagine the interpreters, certified deaf interpreters, will come and learn how to work better with deaf people and with the community, but also recognizing that through that process, they can become tired, they can become frustrated, they can forget why they're doing it. It can easily just become about the money, but hopefully to have them come and remember that we are a community. Interpreters are part of that community. And they have been. And remembering what that means, and that it's a partnership. And really, that's important, that legacy. And what does it look like? And how do we form this partnership? And that is the deaf culture wealth. That is what helps us both to achieve success. But really, I want them to take away from my presentation is that they have a responsibility in this partnership, that they have to analyze themselves and see how they can work better with the community. And really, without the deaf community interpreters, we wouldn't need them. But also, people have to understand that without interpreters, we wouldn't have access. I'm often sign to deaf people and to interpreters, and just making that connection and having responsibility for that connection. That is what is going to continue to grow the deaf culture wealth and improve it. So man, after these 50 years, thinking about where we're at now and how things have changed, I mean, obviously, we're focused on so many things, and we have big culture influences, and it's starting to change on the positive way, and some things aren't. But this is a different system. So how do you suggest that that partnership to build the culture, the deaf culture wealth continues? Like, what would that system look like? I think the most important thing is for people and organizations like the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf, RAD, they must understand and recognize that their organization structure, how they run it, how everything is set up, and how people view that organization is controlled by politics, and that how that influences their organization and how it's set up. And then sometimes that organization isn't really matching the community. So just trying to match the deaf community more than the regular world. And that means continuing to analyze ourselves and understanding the process and how we can match the deaf community and making those adjustments. And so it really requires a lot of flexibility. And I mean, it could be simple for an organization to just follow the normal American culture, but really recognizing that it's for the deaf community and analyzing that perspective, I think that will help RAD continue to create a strong partnership. And that's really the most important thing for RAD, is to really recognize that and understand that and analyze themselves as a company and organization. Okay, so my last question. I'm a deaf person, so what would be the first step on how to start this process? What can I do? Well, I think people, need to look at over the last 50 years, like what interpreting has looked like. And okay, give me a second. Let me back up. So we have interpreters, and I think it's important for them to remember. It's true that some interpreters realize and are fascinated with the language and love it and are passionate about it. But recognizing that an interpreter with the deaf community, that is the most important thing. It's wonderful to be an interpreter. The language, everything, the mental processing, the money is great. It's a good profession. But without the deaf community, the interpreting profession wouldn't exist. So now that means that they need to recognize how they can support us. And I hope that each individual interpreter will do a self-analysis on how they can better support the deaf community, how they can match our goals, and how they can support us with what the deaf client wants and what their needs are. And that will change the profession. And I think that's the most important for each individual to recognize. Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming. I'm so excited for your presentation, and hopefully we'll start to influence some change. So thank you for being involved and taking people who are willing to make comments, and also for bringing up this hard topic. And, oh, it's my pleasure. I really, it, it requires the whole community for any profession to be elevated. It really requires the whole community. And especially when you're working with an oppressed community, that is even more important to help us elevate each other. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some of my thoughts tonight. Thank you for coming.